Good morning. Welcome to the Koinonia Sunday School class. Today we'll be covering the book of Revelation, chapter 13, part 1, the beast out of the sea. Let's start with reading Daniel chapter 2, 32 through 45. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. That is what God revealed to Daniel when King Nebuchadnezzar was disturbed by his dream of the colossus that he had viewed. Now, let's go to chapter 13 of Revelation. Grab your Bibles and follow along if you would. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but it had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and his great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast, and who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of earth will worship the beast, and all whose names had not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed by the sword, with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness. on part of God's people. Now let's go to the questions. If you have your printout, look at question 1. Who do you think is a beast coming out of the sea? Well, we've discussed this before in chapter 6. The beast from the sea is the Antichrist, who has already been on earth for 3.5 years when the first seal in chapter 6 was opened and the rider on the white horse appeared. He was in a mortal state then and now appears here in chapter 13 in what we would call a superhuman state, where he received his death wound. We will expand on the wound in question 4. Daniel 7, 2 through 8 says this. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven, churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was the second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, 'Get up and eat your fill of flesh.' After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them. The 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully." Daniel 7, 2 through 8 gives a description of the beast as 4 creatures: leopard, bear, lion, and dragon. These creatures are also a symbol of the powers that have had a control or influence over Israel. The leopard, which represents Babylon, the bear, which represents Greece, the lion, which represents Medo-Persia, and the dragon, Rome. The days from Nebuchadnezzar's dream to when Christ will return are known as the days of the Gentiles. The kingdom to come that will be on earth during the tribulation is the rise of the new Roman Empire. What do the 10 horns mean? The horns represent the 10 kingdoms that will rise out of the new Roman Empire that will come out in the end times. Daniel 7:24 says this: "The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones, and he will subdue the 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time." What do the 7 heads mean? The 7 heads represent the 7 world powers which have had influence over God's people. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other is yet to come. The 5 that have fallen are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. The one that is would be the Roman world power. And the one that is to come is the Anglo-American world power, which will not last as long as the previous 5. There will be no more human powers after this. What do the 10 crowns represent? The crowns here represent who was reigning at the time of the kingdom. This might seem a bit confusing as there is only 7 powers, but the 8th power that will rise in the end times is Satan's, and he is a composite of all the powers, since he is described as only having 7 heads instead of 8. Therefore, the beast rules with the 10 horns kingdom, which emerges from the fourth beast of Daniel. The crowns are on the seventh head, the kingdom which is to come. Why do you think each head had a blasphemous name? Although it is not representative of anything but they do have meaning. Each kingdom that ruled over God's people did have a false god that they worshipped. Egypt had many. Ra was the main subject. Assyria worshipped Ashur. Babylon had Marduk or Bel. Medo-Persia had Ahura Mazda. Greece had Zeus. And Rome worshipped the emperors. These could possibly be the blasphemous names on the heads. And just as a note, we will discuss this again in chapter 17 when the harlot appears, and there'll be a more descriptive information as to what is the beast with the 7 heads, 10 horns, and blasphemous names is. Question number 2. Does the beast resembling 4 creatures mean anything? The Empire Greece was portrayed as a leopard. The Empire Medo-Persia was portrayed as the bear, and the Empire Babylon was portrayed as the lion. And if you notice, the Empire Rome here is not mentioned as a creature. It is possible that the beast is a composite of the world powers of which the beast from the sea will emerge. Question 3. Why did the dragon give the beast his power and his throne great authority? The dragon gave the beast power so that he could mislead the nations to follow him, thus swaying the Israelites from God. He waited to devour the child the woman was to give birth to, and when he did not accomplish that, the dragon waged war on her offspring. Satan has tried hard to counterfeit everything that God has set up, and miracles and wonders were what Jesus himself performed. Thus, Satan has counterfeited Jesus with the beast from the sea. Question 4. What did one of the beast's heads seeming to have a fatal wound that had been healed mean? Well, once again, Satan is trying to counterfeit something that God has already accomplished. Christ was crucified and buried and rose again, the wound that was healed. The fatal wound that the beast will receive will be a false wound and a false healing. Satan will make it appear that the beast or Antichrist is killed, and he will heal him and make him alive again. But there will be no proof of a wound, no proof of healing. He will arise from the abyss when he receives his superhuman form, and the people will marvel. Now remember, the beast is probably an angelic demon and human. Once again, counterfeiting what God has accomplished through Jesus being fully God and fully human. All those who oppose him will be put to death. His false resurrections will spark a huge movement to follow him, just as Christ's resurrection caused those to follow him. Question 5. Why do you suppose the people were filled with wonder and worshiped the dragon and the beast? At this point in time of the tribulation, the people are thirsty for a leader. The church has been raptured. All the good in the world has been removed, and only the 144,000 sealed evangelists remain, and they are protected from evil. When the beast rises and performs the false miracles and speaks blasphemies, the people not only will accept this, but will wonder and admire and praise it. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 9 and 10 say, "The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie. And all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing, they perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved." Those are the words of Jesus himself explaining the lawless one and the power and authority that will be given to him and why the people worship him. And the last question of part 1 is, why do you suppose the beast was allowed to preach blasphemies for 42 months? The second half of the tribulation will last 42 months. The beast will be allowed to speak and blaspheme God and God's people till the end of days. 2 Thessalonians 2 through 4 says this: He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Thus, setting in motion the abomination of desolation, Satan sets himself up in the temple of God as God. Daniel 9:27 foreseen this. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, or 42 months, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. That ends our study of the beast from the sea. And just as a note, there are a lot of symbolisms in here that we didn't cover, that we will cover when we are able to meet again in Sunday school, and we'll have great discussions, I believe, on the chapter 12 and chapter 13 as we try to get caught up in person. For instance, the beast from the sea does not come from the sea. The sea that they're talking about is the sea of humanity. He will rise as a human, this angelic demon that is Satan's follower. And that sets everything up as we go through chapter 13, the first part here. We're talking about the beast from the sea. Daniel, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, using the animals as symbols of power, world powers. The 7 heads being used as symbols of world powers. We'll get in much more detail when we meet at church and can start discussing this. So be patient. I'm sure that we'll all be back together soon. And just remember, Chris and I are praying for you, and we love you all. And I hope that these lessons online are helping. If you have any questions, please feel free to email them in, or you can even call me. Becca has my phone number. So you all take care until we meet again. Thanks.